سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى نحمده ونستعينه ونثني عليه ونؤمن به ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف بريته ومبلغ رسالاته العبد المؤيد الرسول المسدد المحمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين عباد الله أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. We begin this khutbah on the day of Friday by reminding ourselves to maintain the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We were discussing the concept of ghadab, this concept of anger. And Imam Khomeini was now coming to the end of his discussion. He talked about the negative effects of this ghadab, how when a ghadab enters into the heart of an individual, it doesn't just stop there. Ghadab is just the beginning. Afterwards, this person, the doors of different types of sins now open up to this individual. And this is a topic that's very important in terms of our community. It's important in terms of our personal lives, which is what makes up our community. If things that are happening in our families are not the right things, then this community is not going to be a healthy community, any community that is, yes? And if what's happening inside of the unit of the family is something that is healthy, then this is when you will have a healthy community. This issue of ghadab is one that lies at the very core of the issues that we have in terms of our families, which then reflects itself in the way we raise our children, it then reflects itself in the experience that our children have when they look at the marriage that their mother and father had, for example. It affects a number of different things, and it teaches them that when you're frustrated, this is how you're supposed to react, because this is how it was done in your house, and we'll talk more about that today, inshallah. He said the problem with ghadab is it's not just one sin or two sins. It opens the doors for you to end up doing those types of things that you never imagined or thought you would end up doing. But because in that moment you've lost your temper, you're willing to do anything at that point, yes? And he said, okay, so what is the cure to this ghadab? How am I supposed to go about working on this? He said, listen, the practical cure to this ghadab, he said there's the intellectual side of it. You have to think about the negative effects of it. You have to remind yourself of the negative effects of it. He said then there is the practical cure to ghadab. And that is, number one, to try to control it when it still has not turned into this huge thing. When you start to see it bubbling up inside of you, that's where you have to try to stop yourself. Because he says ghadab, the analogy Imam Khomeini gives, is that ghadab is like fire. The moment it starts to get going, you can't stop it anymore, yes? Initially, you blow it out with a little bit of air or wind or something like that, you blow it out. But once the fire gets going, then jungles will burn, yes? And thousands of kilometers will burn all of a sudden. He says there's no more controlling it at that point. He says a person who's reached that point, he's so sensitive that if you tell him to calm down, then all of a sudden, what will happen? Become even worse. So why are you telling me to calm down? Yes? You know, this culture that we have in this society, this idea that you should never have the right to tell your spouse to calm down, for example, or you should never have the right to tell your wife or your husband to, keep things down. Islam doesn't agree with this. This is something that, people say. No, when you're angry like that, you have to calm down. Otherwise, life is not going to be able to go on. He says that's number one. Number two is that this person has to have some form of movement. We shared hadith in this regard as well last week. Now he moves on to the more fundamental issue here. He says, listen, these are the small tips that Islam gives us left and right. Take care of your anger at the initial steps. That's how you'll be able to take care of it and whatnot. He says, but the real problem, the roots of ghadab is something else. These are the surface level discussion. The root of ghadab is something that you have to cure from its roots. And this is the root of it. He says it has a number of different reasons. He says the biggest reason why someone becomes angry, biggest reason of all, is that there is something that he deeply loves. He has this deep affection for something. And he feels like that thing is being taken away from him. What is that thing that he deeply loves? He says sometimes that thing that he deeply loves is himself. He is so impressed with himself, he loves himself so much, that if someone were to come, for example, say something a bit disrespectful to him, all of a sudden he feels like it's the end of the world. He feels like he has to shout, he has to get back at this person, and he has to say five times the amount that he heard back to this person all of a sudden. He says, hubbun nafs, the love of the self. This is different from having self-esteem, yes? This is different from having confidence. That's not what Imam Khomeini is talking about. He says, no, when you take yourself too seriously and you think you're the most important person on earth, then the smallest of things becomes the biggest issues. Because you're really important. The more important of a person you think you are, the bigger the issue becomes when someone does something that goes against what you want to happen. It comes back from your love, that love that you have for yourself, right? I give this analogy quite often. It's a very interesting analogy. Of course, you guys have to be the judge of that. I shouldn't be the judge of that. But the analogy is this. If you're walking down the street one day and someone accidentally bumps into you, is it a big deal? Does it make the news that day? No. Why? Because you're a normal citizen. You're just walking down the street, someone bumped into you, not important, yes? Because you're not the most important person in this world. But if a president is walking somewhere and someone bumps into him, what happens? The whole world will hear about this. Why? Because he's very important. Someone bumped into him. See, if you see yourself in that light as well, that I'm the most important, I'm the most significant, I'm the most special, then the smallest thing that happens in your life that doesn't go the way you want it to go, all of a sudden what happens? This is the end of the world. How dare he? How dare she? You can't control your anger because you feel like you're too important. Yes? He says the more humility you have, the more it's easier for you to not lose your temper. When someone does something that goes against what you want, you understand this is part of life. It doesn't mean you don't stand up for yourself. You stand up for yourself, but you don't get too angry over it either. This is a fine line. How do you defend yourself without getting angry? How do you defend yourself without losing your temper? These are things that we need to teach our children, of course. He says either it's the love of the self, and this is what a lot of it comes back to, yes? He says either it's that or it's the love of something else. You love something very much in your life. Someone is now taking that away from you. You feel like you need to get angry. You have a fame, and someone is taking that fame away from you. You have a wealth. Someone is taking that wealth away from you. Not in a way where they're stealing from you, for example. No, they're competing with you, for example, yes? Things aren't going the way you want it to go. Because you have that deep love when it comes to the dunya. Anyone who messes with your dunya becomes enemy number one. It's problem number one for you. Because that love and affection is so deep. Anyone touches that thing that you love so much becomes an enemy for you. When you look in the seerah of the ulama, you find the exact opposite of this. I gave this analogy of bumping into a president versus bumping into a normal person. These great scholars of ours, they had self-esteem, they had confidence, but they didn't see themselves as the most important person walking on earth. And so when someone bumped into them, for example, it wasn't too much of a big deal. There's no trace of their anger. And this happened, interestingly enough, in the life of Allama Tabatabai. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless his soul. I've said many times before, you'll hear this from me many times in the future as well. We still don't understand the services that he provided to the ummah. It will take many years for us to understand what type of services and what type of heritage he has left behind. A lot of these scholars that we know of today, many of them in one way or another were a student of Allama Tabatabai. Many of them have benefited from his works. So Allama Tabatabai, a student who knew Allama Tabatabai at that time in Qom, I think I've shared this story before with some of you. He says, I was walking in Qom, and if you've been to Qom before, now it was very, very small. Very, very small. Now it's more developed. He says, I was walking in Qom, and I saw Allama Tabatabai walking around the haram of Lady Ma'asuma, Lady Fatimatul Ma'asuma. And he says, I saw him while he was walking around, and nobody knew him, and nobody cared too much about him. It's only after really he left this world that he started to become more known when people read his works and whatnot. So he says, I was watching him from afar, and as I was watching him, these kids were playing on their bikes, and one of them who's on his bike came and ran into Allama Tabatabai. He fell on the ground, and the child fell on the ground as well. And this is a person who doesn't see himself, like as if he's walking on the wings of angels all of a sudden. Yes? He says, I observed from far away, I saw Allama Tabatabai got up before he picked up his aba. You know, the extra clothing that I don't have with me today, of course. It says, before he picked up his aba, he went to the child. And he checked on the child. He said, are you okay? He said, yeah, I'm fine. And he laughed. The child laughed off, and he went off. And no one was around. And this Allama, this great scholar, that you and I can only imagine how much knowledge he had. He came, he grabbed his aba, just walked on as if nothing happened. God forbid something like that happens to us. Forget about a stranger. God forbid a loved one of ours says something we don't like. Yes? All of a sudden in the house, it's qiyamah. You know, I jokingly say, you have to start working on your akhlaq now so that, God forbid, when we get married, you know, let's say this to the younger guys, you don't turn into the Incredible Hulk every half an hour. get angry, and then all of a sudden it's a person you don't even know anymore. Who was this person? I'd never seen this person before. He says either it's the love of yourself, you're taking yourself too seriously, you love yourself so much that the moment someone touches it, it becomes a problem. Or it's the love of something else. Sometimes it's the love of your wealth. You love your wealth so much, if the economy changes even a little bit, there's no more akhlaq, no more temper, no more patience. And the verses of the Quran speak about this. The Quran says this human being is constantly between these two emotions. He's never balanced. He says, فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانِ, this is Surah Al-Fajr. He says, فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانِ, this human being, إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمًا. Says when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends him something good, a blessing, فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمًا. He says, my Lord has blessed me. He has honored me. In other words, in my words and your words, He loves me. He's on my side. Okay, great. وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ. But then when we take a little bit of his rizq away, فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانًا. He says, this Lord of mine has a problem with me. All of a sudden he goes from being a friend to what? He has animosity towards me. And the verses continue, and as it continues, the Quran says what? وَتُحِبُّونَ الْمَالَ حُبًّا جَمًّا. He loves his wealth so much. If anyone messes with his wealth even a little bit, even if it's God, then all of a sudden God becomes who? Becomes the enemy. Imam Khomeini says these are the roots of this anger. Yes, sit down, I don't know, drink some water, like we do. We recite salawat many times. Yeah, these are good. But the roots is something else. It's something deeper that you have to look at. Okay. Then he moves on. There's one more that he mentions, and a fourth one that I will add to this discussion if I'm worthy of putting my words beside the words of Imam Khomeini. He says, the third issue that comes up, that is the root of anger many times, is that somehow, some way, this person is taught that reacting to situations with anger is a good thing. This is what you're supposed to do. And in some cultures, this is deeply embedded within the culture. That unless you shout and you yell, unless you show that anger and that wrath, you're not a man. It's not. Where's the masculinity? You have to yell, to shout, to show some anger. And this child sees this as well. And he thinks in order for him to be a man, he has to do the same thing. Whereas you see the men who were the most manly of all of them, they were the most patient. Imam Khomeini himself, we're running out of time, so I won't go into much detail. Watch his interviews. I mean, the calmest thing you can ever come across. The calmest person you can ever come across. As if nothing is happening. I mean, it blows your mind. It's unbelievable. The whole world is waiting to see what this man has to say, and he's just so calm. As if he wasn't exiled for 20 plus years. As if he's not leading a country of, 60 million, 50 million. As if the West and the East is not against us. It's just unbelievable. The anger is not even there. It's non-existent. He says sometimes this person has been taught that showing anger is a form of being brave. If you're a man, if you want to show that manlyhood, you have to do what? In the house, you have to put everyone in their place. Okay, this is what Islam apparently, based on this wrong understanding, is teaching us. No, that's not what Islam teaches us. The fourth one I will mention, inshallah, will bring this to an end. And of course, all four of these, they apply to different individuals in different ways. You and I have to sit and study ourselves. The self-awareness that we speak about, reflection that we speak about. This is it. You sit and say, why is it when someone says something, I get angry? And remember this, that the anger that you feel says a lot about you. When you feel angry, this is an indicator. This is information. This is data. Go back and see what is it that made you this angry. Go back and study yourself. So what happened that all of a sudden I've lost my temper to a point where even those who are the closest to me, they feel afraid of me. The people who are closest to me, they don't feel immune when I'm around. What's going on inside of me? What did this person say that had me lose my temper all of a sudden? Anger says a lot about you. And you can learn a lot from it as well. And I can learn from it as well. The fourth one that I will just mention is sometimes when you have the wrong interpretation of what someone is saying. Oh, this is what he said, so this is what he means. No, not necessarily. So this is what she means when she says this. Oh, you don't know that. You're jumping to conclusions many times, yes? And this is where sometimes you need help from others to look at the situation from outside of that situation and give you an unbiased understanding of what is really happening in this situation. That's why you have this concept in Islam. Though it's not practiced as often today, but the Quran says when two people, they have marital issues and things are not going well, one of the ways, not the only way, one of the ways is for them to have people who will come, sit, people who are trustworthy, people who are mature, people who have been through this before, that they come and they sit and they listen to both sides to see what is an unbiased understanding. Doesn't mean it's going to solve everything, but at least you get to see a third, set of eyes on this situation. When she says this, is my understanding correct? When he says this, is this the understanding I'm supposed to walk away with? Or is this simply the result of an insecurity I have? The moment someone says something about this issue, I feel so insecure, I feel like they're attacking me. I have to get angry. I have to yell back at them. Yes? I have to put them back in their place. Sometimes you'll see it comes from the insecurities that one feels. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the tawfiq to work on these characteristics before, God forbid, it is too late. With that, inshallah, we'll bring the first khutbah to an end. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. اللهم صل على محمد اللهم صل بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين أثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا ثم أصلي وأسلم على نجيبه وجليله وحافظ سره الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأراضين بأبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل وسلم على علي أمير المؤمنين وفاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين وعلى سبطي نبي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة وعلى علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في أرضك. صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات عباد الله أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. We begin the second khutbah again by reminding ourselves to have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I will go through a couple of points before we continue with the tafsir of Surah Al-Hadid. These points I mentioned because we have a lot of the youngsters who are, in the Friday prayers, and many of us, because of COVID, we may have not had the opportunity to be attending Friday prayers for a long time. So I'll mention just a couple rulings as it relates to the Friday prayer, and inshallah, because it can be a bit confusing at times. So I'll mention a couple rulings about that, and then we'll move on to the tafsir of Surah Al-Hadid. Of course, Salatul Jum'ah is 2 rak'ats. It's not wajib right now, but it's highly recommended to perform it. You perform it instead of Salatul Dhuhr. You do not perform Salatul Dhuhr afterwards. Yes, some scholars say it might be good to do so, but it's definitely not required to do so. I know this might seem simple, but I've received this question many, many times before. So I have many situations I've seen someone does Jummah and then they say, Shaykh, wait, I have to do my Dhuhr. I said, you did your Jummah. That's instead of your Dhuhr Salat. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, of course, is that 2 rakats. I mentioned that. Point number 3 is that you have these 2 qunuts. Interestingly enough, these 2 qunuts technically are not wajib in your Friday prayer. They're mustahab. And of course we do them because, that's how Friday prayer is normally done. But in case you miss them sometimes or whatever the case might be, this does not make your salat batil. They are mustahab in this regard. Yes, I think we got a... Okay. And of course, it's mustahab to do the verses of Surah Al-Jum'ah in the first rak'ah and the verses of Surah Al-Munafiqun in the second rak'ah. Not wajib again, this is simply mustahab. And of course, you need at least 5 people, including the imam, in order to do so. The qunut in the first rak'ah is before the ruku'. The qunut in the second rak'ah is after the ruku'. Recite salawat, please. We'll continue with the tafsir of Surah Al-Hadid. We reached verse number 11. مَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يُقْرِضُ اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا فَيُضَاعِفَهُ لَهُ وَلَهُ أَجْرٌ كَرِيمٌ. Who is it that will lend to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from his wealth? And Allah will take this wealth and He will multiply it and He will give him an honorable reward. And we talked about this. And the one point I want to mention before we move on from this is that the greatest form of generosity, the greatest form of having sakhawa, all these ahadith that we have about being sakhi and being generous and giving in the path of Allah, the most important out of all of these is your basic financial duties. These basic financial duties, if the human being is not doing these, then the mustahabbat are not going to have the effect that they're supposed to have, yes? These basic duties is the foundation. Otherwise, if you don't take care of these, I can be generous as much as I want to be generous, but it's not going to have that effect because I'm ignoring something that's even more important in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes it's the khums of a person. Sometimes it's zakah. Though zakah applies a little less to us living in this part of the world. Sometimes it might be the kafarat that someone has that they're supposed to pay for their fasting. Maybe some they may have missed, some they may have, God forbid, broken on purpose. Whatever the case might be, these financial wajib duties that we have in Islam are the most important form. That's why the hadith says, the most generous of people is the one who takes care of his financial duties, the wajibat. He's the most generous because these are the most important ones in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes? And this is why, by the way, I mentioned this as we move on, that City of Knowledge is providing guidance on this issue, in particular the issue of khums, because it's a very complicated topic, yes? It's a very delicate topic as well, but alhamdulillah, City of Knowledge is working very hard. I've looked across North America of other institutions or other individuals who are able to offer this, and it's not something you find commonly. I'll just put it that way. If anyone finds anything like it, I'd love to hear about it. Very seldom do you find scholars, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with other scholars who can give you guidance on these issues, but City of Knowledge has worked hard to be able to provide these consultations to the brothers and sisters, and that is because, I'm going off topic now, but that is because we never saw an Islamic center as a place where we just do lectures. No, across North America, we have many Islamic centers who cater to that need. There are a bunch of other needs that our centers across North America are not catering to. These are some of them. These other services that a person needs in order to practice his faith, in order to know how to go about things. And this is why this is part of what City of Knowledge offers. Moving on. These individuals who give from their wealth and they practice the religion properly, يَوْمَ تَرَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ. You see these individuals on the Day of Judgment, Ya Rasulullah. What happens to them on the Day of Judgment? يَسْعَ نُورُهُمْ بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَبِأَيْمَانِهِمْ. Their light moves ahead of them and on their right side. What is the Quran referring to? That these people who are doers of good, they walk and the light lights up in front of them on their right and on their right side. Mufassirin have different opinions. What is this light? And beyond that, why is it in front of them and on their right side? In front of you makes sense. So you want your path, you want to see where you're headed. But why does it say the right side as well? Different opinions have been mentioned in this regard. And some have said, بِأَيْمَانِهِمْ means no, it doesn't mean on the right side. It means it comes from their good deeds. Because yamin sometimes means the right hand, sometimes it means those good things that you do. So different opinions in this regard. Nonetheless, this is a light that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised for the person who has the right belief system and he tries his best to do good deeds. If he falls short, he does his tawbah. It's very simple. If you want to make it into heaven, by the way, this is the strategy. It's not complicated. At least on paper, it's not complicated. Theoretically. You do your best. If you fall short, you do what? You do tawbah immediately. God forbid Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes someone from this world, he's done his tawbah. As long as it's genuine, yes? Not just faking it. He says these people, they will walk, they will have a light with them. This light we have heard of in other verses of the Quran as well. Where have we heard of this light that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses this individual? In Ayatul Kursi, the third verse of Ayatul Kursi, what do we read? We say, Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu. Allah is the wali of those who believe. يُخْرِجُهُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. He takes them out of darkness and into what? Into light. Is this light a metaphor? No, this light is not a metaphor. Literally there is a light on the Day of Judgment that guides this person. Yes, this is the light of the faith of this person in this world. In the next world, it presents itself as what? As a light that guides this person. On that day, we've heard many times that people are running around. Everyone is looking for their own problem, their own issue. Some, no, they're not lost on that day. Some, they have someone to accompany them, walk them through all these steps, and then into heaven, as the verses of the Quran say. So this is a real light. And these people, as they are walking towards heaven, they hear, Bushrakumul yawm. The glad tidings that we give to you, the good news that we give to you, the malaika are speaking to them. Jannatun tajri min tahtiha al-anhar. Are these gardens that have springs that are running beneath them. Khalidina fiha. You will be there forever. ذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. This is the great victory. They thought they would be victorious in this world if you invested in this thing and it made a lot of money. That's not bad. It's good. That's not the great victory. Yes? Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. He has a very beautiful line in the Hikam of Nahjul Balagha. He says, the wealthy and the poor will only become clear who's wealthy and who's poor on the Day of Judgment. Here, yes, this person's wealthy, this person's poor. You can just look at the lifestyle sometimes and figure that out. He says, no, the real wealthy and the real poor, it only becomes clear when they weigh your deeds. Bushrakumul yawm. This is the glad tidings that we give to you. Now the Quran moves on. He says, these mu'mineen, they're walking towards heaven. The light is lighting up the path in front of them. There are those who weren't doing these things. As much as the Prophet used to come to them and tell them, this is what you need to do, this person is, who's seen the next world anyways? Right? This is what we say sometimes, yes. Either in literally or in terms of our actions. Forget about it. He says, يَوْمَ يَقُولُ الْمُنَافِقُونَ وَالْمُنَافِقَاتِ. On that same day, there are munafiqeen, people who used to be with these believers, but they didn't really practice what these believers used to practice. They didn't believe what these believers used to believe. But they would spend time with them. They were around them. Yes, they were in the same society. He says, يَوْمَ يَقُولُ الْمُنَافِقُونَ وَالْمُنَافِقَاتُ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. They address the believers. They say, انظُرُونَ. Look at us. Just turn towards me. نَقْتَبِسْ مِن نُورِكُمْ. It says, look at me so that I can take away from your light a little bit at least. I'm lost. I need your light on this day. انظُرُونَ نَقْتَبِسْ مِن نُورِكُمْ. You know, you've seen, if the lights go out, right? There's no electricity, like we experienced not too long ago. You call your neighbor, you're like, do you have like a flashlight? Or maybe if someone has a flashlight in the house, what do? You say, I'm going to be with you the whole night. Wherever you go, I'm going to be with you as well. Why? Because wherever he sheds light, you can benefit from that light as well. He says the munafiqun and munafiqat, who in this world, they used to act rough and tough and they used to be bold. On that day, they're begging. They say, just look at us so that we can have a little bit of light as well on this day. نَقْتَبِسْ مِن نُورِكُمْ. And what do the believers respond to them? Look at this line. It says, قِيلَ ارْجِعُوا وَرَاءَكُمْ. They are told, this is not the place to gain the lights. The life that you had before is where you were supposed to gain this light. قِيلَ ارْجِعُوا وَرَاءَكُمْ. Go back to where you were before. What does that mean? Not this life. That life that used to make fun of the Prophet and used to deny him and used to do as you wished, that's where you are supposed to be gaining this light. And here's the good news. You and I are in that life right now. This is that moment. This is that moment that later on we will sit back and say, I wish I had done this. قِيلَ ارْجِعُوا وَرَاءَكُمْ فَالْتَمِسُوا نُورًا. Go and get the light from there. You know, when someone comes to a test, they're not prepared for the test. You know, they come to you and say, can you give me the answer to this one? Can you give me the answer to that one? You say, listen, now's not the time. Yesterday when I was working so hard, a year before when I was working, that's when you had to study for this test. Now it's not going to be beneficial for you. قِيلَ ارْجِعُوا وَرَاءَكُمْ فَالْتَمِسُوا نُورًا. And then what happens? The Quran says, فَضُرِبَ بَيْنَهُمْ بِسُورٍ لَهُ بَابٍ. Then all of a sudden, a wall is built between them. Separates them from one another. Why is it significant? Because in this world they were together. In this world you couldn't tell them from one another. But he says on that day, they are separated from one another. بِسُورٍ لَهُ بَابٍ. This wall has a door in it. Why does it have a door? It's a separation between these two. If anything, you would assume it would be a full separation between the two, yes? You guys on this side, these guys on this side. Because the Quran tells us, Day of Judgment is Yawmul Furqan, the day where good and bad are separated from one another. Yawmul Fasl, the day where good and bad are completely separated from one another. And the Quran says there's a wall that's built between them. But lahu bab. But it has a door. Why? Because these guys will be able to see one another. Why? Because in this world they used to spend time with one another as well. Except on one side of this wall, babun batinuhu fihi rahmah. One side of this wall is full of mercy. On the other side of the wall, وَظَاهِرُهُ مِنْ قِبَلِهِ الْعَذَابِ. The other side is what? Is torture. The other side is punishment. But they can see one another. Because what? In this world, these guys were together. And then the Quran then continues to explain to you and I the conversation that these two are having with one another. Because they knew each other in this world. Imagine, God forbid, I enter into the next world. There's someone else I know who is a very pure person. I used to spend time with this person. I used to hang out with this person. I knew this person's family. Then all of a sudden on that day, he's on that side, I'm on this side. You have questions. You have things you want to discuss. You're like, well, listen, we were together. What happened? If anything, we spent so much time together. We should be together now too. But the response comes that it's different. And I'll end with this point, yes? This is the beauty of the Quran. Only the Quran will tell you, not only that the Day of Judgment exists, not only the characteristics and the attributes and the features of this day, but the conversations that people are having on that day with one another. The Quran is the only book who will tell you what the people of hellfire say to the people of Jannah. And what the people of Jannah tell to what? The people of hellfire. And what the munafiqeen say to the mu'mineen. And what the mu'mineen say to the munafiqeen. Those of them who used to be friends on a surface level. They used to spend time with one another. The only book in the world that can tell you these details is what? It's the Quran. We're going to tell you exactly what this person is going to say. Amongst those things that he's going to say, لَمْ نَكُمْ مِنَ الْمُصَلِّينَ. We used to avoid praying. That's why we ended up here. وَلَمْ نَكُنْ نُطْعِمُ الْمِسْكِينَ. And we would not feed the poor. We had financial duties. I knew a part of my wealth was not mine. But I didn't care about it. This is the conversations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala narrates for us between the people of heaven and the people of hellfire. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He blesses us to be amongst those who will enter heaven. Please remember the family of this young brother who's passed away, this awful news and this sad news that we've also received. I believe the body will be moved, inshallah, to Pakistan, if I'm not mistaken. But please remember the family. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them patience. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them strength. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise him with Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. A'udhu billah min ash-shaytan ar-rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. صلى الله عليه وسلم. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض، الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين. وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم. ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم. مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا. بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين. قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما. قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل على
محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. تسبيح فاطمة الزهراء سلام الله عليها. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. Brothers and sisters, there is a request for dua Sahet, Mushairbano auntie, mother of our brother Murtaza, Mazhar Abbas, Raza and Mustafa. She is in ICU. And also other mu'mineen who have requested for dua Sahet. Let's recite 5 times Amma Yujib. May Allah give shifa to all inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibu al-muftarra idha da'ahu yakshifu as-su'. عما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء. عما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء. عما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء. عما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. الله Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Humble request to please recite Surah Fatiha for Marhum Mehdi Jafri, who just recently passed away, and his funeral is actually at Moment Center after Jumma. So please recite Surah Fatiha for him, and also include Marhuma Najma Begum. She was the mother of Maulana Shahid Hussain, and include all of your marhumin also with a loud salawat. Allah salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Also a humble request, please recite Surah Fatiha for marhumin of today's Niyaz sponsor, marhum Sayyid Hussain Shah, marhuma Sayyida Tahira Shah, marhum Muhammad Rashid, marhuma Amina Rashid, marhum Sayyid Muhammad Ali Shah, marhuma Najma Shah, and Shuhada Islam with a loud salawat. Allah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin ar-Rahman مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Just a quick reminder, if you like to sponsor the lunch for the Jumma, you can contact myself, or you can go online at ckdfw.org/sponsor, and you can donate it there. Wa Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله استغفر الله ربي يا محسن قد أتاك المسيء أنت المحسن وأنا المسيء فتجاوز عن قبيح ما عندنا بجميل ما عندك يا كريم الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقوم. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل على
محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، واستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. Inshallah, recite Dua Wahdat all together. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا إله إلا الله إلها واحدا ونحن له مسلمون. لا إله إلا الله ولا نعبد إلا إياه مخلصين له الدين ولو كره المشركون. لا إله إلا الله ربنا ورب آبائنا الأولين. لا إله إلا الله وحده وحده أنجز وعده ونصر عبده وعز جنده وهزم الأحزاب وحده. فله الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت ويميت ويحيي وهو حي لا يموت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.